Welcome to a Father's Flame podcast where you will get the chance to hear stories of the most successful men who have excelled as husbands, fathers, and entrepreneurs. You will learn wise and proven principles during these simple conversations that are geared towards the core four categories of a successful man. That's faith, family, finances, and fitness. My name is Jeff Short. I'm a follower of Jesus for 21 years. I've been married for 14 years to my lovely wife, and we have 5 amazing children. I am a firefighter by trade and entrepreneur at heart. And this podcast was created for the purpose of pressing courage and new wisdom into the men of our nation. Families need strong fathers in these trying times, and our nation needs diligent men to lead. So today, on episode 1, I'm excited to introduce Dale Gibbons, who I have had the honor to learn from this past year. Dale is the founder of Business Breakthrough Advisors. He has built 3 7-figure businesses and has dedicated his career to helping others grow profitable and fulfilling companies. He is the author of The 90-Minute Business Breakthrough, where he shares 8 strategies that will generate $100,000 or more in new profits without spending more on advertising. Dale is also the creator of the Leadership Selling Method, a proven model for building trust and winning more customers in an increasingly skeptical world. All right. Welcome, Dale.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for being with us here today.
Oh, it's good to see you. I'm so glad to be number one, your inaugural interview here. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's episode 1. We're really hoping to make an impact in many families, really, but focusing on the fathers because, when there's strong men, there's good families, really. And I think it'll be the
Right.
heartbeat of our nation is having good men.
For sure. For sure. The statistics tend to point us in that direction for sure. We need to do exactly that.
Well, Dale, I've had just the privilege working with you ever since I met you. Just something stood out about you, and that's why, we connected. And so I want to just kind of dive into this. My first thing to get started is, are you a hot sauce guy?
Am I a hot sauce guy? Well, that's a good question. Not really. I'm not a hot sauce guy. My boys are.
Okay, well, in the fire service, like we're always doing, it seems like hot sauce challenges. So you got to try the hottest stuff that burns your mouth. And anyways, okay, well, moving on.
I'm not a hot sauce guy. I have walked barefoot on hot coals before. So I don't know.
How was that experience?
It was phenomenal, actually. It was something I thought I would never do or have the capacity or capability to do, but I did it and it was just unbelievable.
Is that a Tony Robbins event?
No, it wasn't at a Tony Robbins event. It was at a different but it was still very fantastic. It was a much smaller group. There's probably only about 30 of us or so. And it's been probably about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago now, but it was pretty amazing.
So do your feet get burnt? How do you survive that? How do your feet feel after that?
The idea is that when you can put your mind in a certain state, your body can overcome things and your body can do amazing things. And that's really what it was about. Tony Robbins talks a lot about states, and he mentions this a lot. If you've read or done anything related to him, he's always talking about states of mind. And so there was a lot of pre-work here in this event. This was a leadership retreat center out in the desert, about an hour bus ride from Las Vegas. It was very, very, very good experience, and we had probably 2 days working up to this, but we didn't. We were going to be walking on hot coal. That they had done in the 2 days prior to this was preparing us for what they knew to be this pretty amazing.
You there, Dale?
I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, we lost you there for a second. So you said it was it was kind of a surprise. That would be definitely a surprise to be doing.
Yeah, we didn't know. We didn't know that's what it was going to be. It was an event. that we knew we were going to experience, but we
Yeah,
didn't
that's
know it was
awesome.
going to be that. And it was cool.
So you did go to the higher mental level or to accomplish that. So good job.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of support around you and things like that. And there's a very specific sort of, I don't want to say protocol because that doesn't seem like, but there's a very specific sequence of events that you go through to mentally prepare yourself. But most of it is the space between your ears. I mean, it's a lot of taking out the head trash, honestly. Um, and it's amazing what our bodies can do. If we control things with our mind, and we can heal ourselves. We can do a lot of things. And the Bible tells us. The Bible even talks about the renewing of our mind. And how
Sure.
important that is, and how powerful that is. So, yeah, it's a good experience.
So you are a man of faith.
Mm-hmm. Most
When
definitely.
did that start for you?
I was
When
11
did you
years
start?
old. Yeah, I was 11 years old. It was this little Baptist church, Jeff, in a small town here near where I live. I've lived in this area most of my life, with the exception of about 7 years overseas. But yeah, as a little Baptist church, the Reverend Clayton Clark got a hold of me as an 11-year-old boy, and that's when it happened. And when I went to college, I was not a wild child at all. I was part of the Navigators and things like that, but I've never really been. I was not a wild kid or anything like that. I don't have any stories of redemption from drugs or anything like that. My it hasn't been that exciting, I guess.
Honestly, my story is kind of, yeah, more, overcoming and getting rid of alcohol and other things.
Hmm.
But I think the best story is your story, where you don't go into the dark side of life and the sinful things, and you do stay more true and pure. So that's what I'm hoping for my kids. I don't want them to have I got saved out of drugs and depression and off the streets. So
Hmm. Hmm.
anyways, I think that's your parents must have had an impact on that.
Well, they did. I mean, my parents eloped in the 10th grade. They didn't finish high school. My dad never. My mother got a GED. My dad never did. He had a 10th grade education. They both worked in factories pretty much their whole lives, with the exception of my mother. I was able to get her out of the factory, um, and into a more white collar job. But the bills and the babies came pretty soon after they got married, and so there was a lot of financial stress on them and things like that. And I can remember a lot of conversations about money when we were just little kids, when we were supposed to be asleep, and we pretended to be asleep because you didn't want to be awake, because that wasn't going to go well. And those conversations were inside, using their outside voices, so to speak. And you know, I, I think I think a lot of kids in that place, and I might have struggled with this thought a little bit. A lot of kids would think they're a burden on their parents, and I might have thought that. But what I ultimately allowed myself to believe was that my parents needed my help, not that I was a burden. That's different. It's different when you decide that you're going to believe one thing versus another. And what we decide and what we end up believing is a decision that we make. Everything's a decision. If we believe we're a burden, then that's a decision we made to believe that. If we believe something else, then we've made that decision. And
Mm,
so um, I was fortunate, and I decided to believe that my parents would that they needed my help.
wow. And so you grew up knowing the Lord. Your parents. So your dad had a job and your mom had a job, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
my dad worked in a factory making wooden handles for hammers and axes and things like that. And I can remember going in and seeing him. He worked on this big sanding belt and everything. And I was very proud of both of my parents. Now, my dad was an alcoholic, and he wasn't a mean alcoholic. He just got really kind of silly, and I didn't like to be around him because that wasn't the dad that I knew. He was like a different person. And my mother was very choleric personality. She was the Army general mother who was very much protecting her sons. There was three of us, and she was the disciplinarian. So yeah, they had a huge impact on us. It was back in the '70s. I'm a '70s kid, and everyone had longer hair over the ears, sort of that Leif Garrett haircut. You probably wouldn't remember him, but but we were little military guys. We had the white wall haircuts, and we went to school. And my mom made our jeans and our shirts. She made all of our clothes. I grew up just wanting a pair of jeans that came from the store, and so my parents ran a pretty tight ship, for sure.
Okay. So what does your faith look like on a daily basis, like today? How does it impact you?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, on a daily basis, the way it impacts me is it guides my purpose for being here on this planet. Um, I think when we're younger, we're not really sure what that's for. We don't know why we're here. And even when we're older, a lot of people, until they die, they don't know why they're here. But after they die and they transition from this life to the next one, they figure it out pretty quickly. That's revealed to us, I believe.
Sure.
And so, it's I don't know how anyone, or it would certainly be difficult to go through this life experience that we're having here in this three-dimensional world where we're living. Would be difficult to go through that experience without a true sense of purpose. I'm the opposite of a nihilist. I certainly am not a person who thinks this is all for nothing and we should just, end it now. I mean, that's the definition of a nihilist. I'm the opposite of that. I mean, we're here for a very, 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 very specific purpose. And I think that all of us are sort of on this journey that's designed to teach us contrast, because there's good and bad in the world. So those are two contrasting points, and we're here to figure out what or how we're supposed to make our contribution to the world. And so my faith has made that crystal clear for me, and that makes getting up every day and doing what I do not a burden. It's a very exciting thing.
Are there habits that you have every day, like in your faith? I mean, I'm sure it incorporates praying and reading, but what does that look like just on a tangible basis?
Yeah, certainly praying and reading. I mean, I get up pretty early. I always have. Not that that's necessarily, I don't know how virtuous that is. It's just that's something I've always kind of done. But also, I turn in fairly early, so I don't know if it's that big a deal. But I get up pretty early, and I spend a fair amount of time. I mean, the first 3 hours of the day is just me, just the creator, my dogs, and a lot of times I'll walk in the woods here on our property. We have a pretty nice property. It's 111 acres in southern Indiana. All the colors are beautiful right now, and so I've got trails all over that, and I take walks on that with the dogs, and I just take in creation and do let's say my mind clearing and my praying during that time.
That's awesome. About 10 months ago, I started getting up early, and I think the Lord was leading me. And this was just part of my story of just really getting back to being the person that He's called me to be in my calling. Like you're saying, it's a very high calling, which I think we're both part of a kingdom, right? That our leader, he chose to serve rather than to be served. And that's why he's different than any other God. All other gods love to be served, and religion loves to be served, but our example, he didn't need to be served, so he came and served people, and that's even why I'm doing this podcast, is really to serve others people, the conversations that they need to hear, and hopefully serving you and flushing out some parts of your life that are going to bless many people. And
Mhm.
so, but the morning thing, I'd heard this before, that it's kind of like the manna that went out in the morning that fed Israel. That's like
Mhm.
angels' food, and it was
Mhm.
only there in the morning, and then the sun like made it disappear. And so there may be some aspect to that morning time and collecting and having, so that you have this food, this nourishment to feed yourself and feed your family. So
Mhm.
can't say that conclusively, but it's just something interesting.
I don't know. For me, it's the most noble part of the day. It's where everything is new and everything is fresh, and we sort of reset everything for another 24 hours, and you get to take another run at it, and
I like that.
do things to fulfill your mission here and God's mission for us while we're here.
Yeah, I totally agree. What do you think the fruit is of being able to take that time? And you got kind of a special circumstance with that nice property, but what's
Mhm.
the fruit of it, do you think, in your life?
It's a blessing for sure. The fruit of it is the first thing that comes to mind, Jeff, really is just is clarity, because we have so much coming at us. I mean, we have so many inputs. This digital society, this digital world we live in. If you think about, just 100 years ago, and in the historical timeline is just a blip. I mean, like a blip of time. But 100 years ago, what it would have been 1922. 200 years ago, it would have been 1820. I mean, the world was so different then. Even in the 90s, we didn't have cell phones.
Yeah,
Just
true.
just a couple decades ago, it was just a while back. I mean, I grew up in the peak of my career, or at least the early part of my career. We didn't have cell phones. You had to pull over and find a payphone and stand there in the freezing cold and put quarters in the darn thing. And so that seems archaic to most people now, but I remember it like it was just a minute ago. And but we have so much technology and we have so many inputs that we just need to have some time where we're as close to the dirt, the earth, as we possibly can be, and take away all of those stimulus, those stimulating things, and just focus on the creation around us. We've all had I think, at least I know I have, um, we've had these experiences where I don't know what you would call these. I think there's a term for it, but we've had these experiences where, maybe we've had a brush with death. You're on a motorcycle and you just narrowly escaped a 18 wheeler, and if timing had been a nanosecond away, you would have been dead. You know, and all of a sudden the reality of that just sort of and the weight of it just sort of comes down on you, and everything else that you've been worried about or thinking about or concerned about, it just poof, it just disappears, and you're so alive and in the moment, right there, that you're not distracted and you have complete clarity about who you are, and you feel and sense the awe and the awesomeness of the world we live in and the creation that we're a part of. But then it only lasts a few moments, and then all of a sudden someone honks their horn or the phone rings or whatever, and then you're thrust back into that flow of everyday life again. So I think going to those places, take a walk in a park, or anything like that, put your phone away and your computer away. I think it helps us to get closer to that, and you can even recreate it if you practice it and focus on it a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds so true. I know there's something you said that it kind of something I've been thinking about is, why do things or experiences, like, they're kind of fleeting, like you just said. So like the moments of bliss or clarity, um, I don't know. I've experienced that as you were telling that
Hmm.
story.
Hmm.
I've definitely experienced that, and it's fleeting. But you're kind of saying that at least you're, I don't know, in the mornings able to go on a walk and just get back to clarity. And it's not high mountain peak moments in life, but it's just a good reset every morning.
Yeah, I I'm an amateur meditator. I mean, the amateur of amateur meditators. Um, you know, through prayer and meditation, both. Now they're different, um, and they are both very beneficial and very powerful. But I grew up only knowing and thinking about just prayer, which is a conversation with our Creator, and but meditation is different. It's just completely being quiet and in the presence of our Creator. It's not having a conversation. It's being quiet and being in the presence of, and even and that then sort of brings on this feeling of awe that you get whenever you do have that brush with death, because those brushes with death, maybe those are divinely orchestrated, maybe they're not, but
Well, they are.
I believe they are. I choose to believe those are divinely orchestrated events,
Yeah.
and they're designed. They have a purpose for us, and they certainly get our attention. And maybe if nothing else, that's what it does, and it reminds us of how fragile living is, how fragile our life is, how temporary this assignment is that we're on here, and and how important it is to focus on the right things. And my favorite verse in the Bible is, what is it, Philippians 4:8, where you're focusing all things that are good and praiseworthy and things like that. I was just on LinkedIn right before hopping on this interview here with you, and I happened to see a post about a young man who took his life, and it was a picture of him in tears sitting in his car, and it was the last picture of him before he took his life.
So,
And there was a description about he was $20,000 in debt, and there was these other things he was struggling with, but it seemed to be all financial. It wasn't like he was going through a divorce or anything. And I don't mean to make light of anything. I certainly don't intend to do that. But isn't it amazing how we can allow our thought life to spiral out of control to the point where $20,000 in debt is worth taking your life? Now, I'm sure there's a whole lot more to that story, but that was all that was revealed, and so let's assume that's really it. Um, that's so tragic. It's tragic no matter what,
yeah.
but it's so important that we're focusing on the right things, and that verse in Philippians is to me the thing that I go back to when my thinking and my head trash gets in the way, and I need to push it. I need to push it out of the way.
Yeah. I like how you put that. I know we got head trash. I struggle with that. I feel like I went through a season of probably like 5 years, and I think it had something to do with like watching too much of the news. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and looking and researching too many things. And even though some of it is true, like I don't want to think about a lot of those things. Like they're not really worth thinking about. And that verse you shared would always come to mind. It's like, I know I need to think about honorable things, what
Mm-hmm.
things that are good and noteworthy and pure. So
Mm-hmm.
thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, somebody told me once, I'd give them credit if I could remember who it was, but someone told me once, Dale, remember, you can't change the news, but the news can change you. And so I started just
That's really good.
stiff arming the news, and only going to the news whenever I felt like it was very important. And what I've realized is, um, there's enough people in my life that if a bridge collapses or a queen dies or something, I'm going to know it within 15 minutes. Somebody's going to tell me, you
Yeah.
know. And so I don't need to be plugged into the news all the time, sucking all that up. And the news is designed. It's a very competitive business, and so everyone is competing for eyeballs. And so what gets eyeballs is sensationalism. We all rubberneck at an accident. That's an eyeball the accident is getting. And so what are they going to show us? They're going to show us all the negative gore and accidents and terrible things. And so, but that's not the majority of life. That's not a representation of everything that's going on out there. It's a representation of the worst they can find so they can get your attention. And so you'll watch it, and then their advertisers will pay them more money. That's the model. And it's easy to forget that. And so taking the news apps off the phone and unplugging from that, and just going on a strict news diet. It's a pretty positive thing.
I just wrote that down. That is excellent. Some of the most successful people I know, like they've all brought that up. Like it's just not part of their life.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I like learning from successful people, and
Yeah. Well, I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said, why make all the mistakes yourself? Don't make all the mistakes yourself. No, she said, hang on, I'm getting this wrong. Learn from the mistakes of others because you'll never live long enough to make them all yourself. I think that's what she said, something like that.
I wish I had the Bradley truth bomb thing right now. I would have been just hitting that. He just makes that sound where it's like, boom, you better remember that.
Yeah.
That is good stuff, Dale. Appreciate that. So let's transition. I want to get through the category of family, so we can get to the next couple here. So tell us about your family. How long have you been married?
32 years.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
And what a testimony. That's awesome.
32 years. My wife just turned 19, and I married her and took her to Brazil, and we lived there for 4 years together.
4 years in Brazil.
4 years in Brazil.
What's the backstory on that? Did you have no people there? Was it?
No, we didn't know anybody there. Actually, that's not true. We knew a couple people there. I went to, I was working with General Electric at the time. It was the aircraft engine group. It's called GE Aviation now. And I was a field representative for them. It was my first job out of college. I loved it. It was just a lot of fun. And I took the job when I was single, and I'd known my wife, Tabby, for quite a few years. We've been family friends, and so I had known her since she was 12. But obviously, it was years later before we got married. But I was on an assignment in New York at this time, and I was going to be going to Brazil, being moved from New York to Brazil on a new assignment. And Tabby and I had kind of reconnected and things like that. But we ended up getting together and starting the dating process. And then I moved to Brazil, and we got, that was in August of 1990, and we got married in, let's see, is that right? Yeah, August of 1990. No, wait, I moved to Brazil in June of 90, I think it was, and we got married in August of 90. And then I took her back to Brazil. So I was there a couple months by myself. And so I was there on an assignment with GE.
All right.
Yeah. Turned 19, left her family, never been out of the country, went to Brazil with me.
Wow. So she saw something in you that she trusted.
I guess so. And she's a wonderful lady. She's just an angel, honestly. I mean, she really is. She's the sweetest person I know. And she keeps me. I tell everybody, look, if it's a joke, but not totally. Part of jokes and what makes them funny is there's a stream of truth in them, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I tell my friends, so I'll tell all of your friends that, if it weren't for me, we'd have no money, and if it weren't for Tabby, we'd have no friends. So
truth bomb.
We're a good team.
That's exactly how I feel. Like I'm relating to so much of what you're saying, Dale. Yeah. Like we would not be social at all if my wife Rachel wasn't scheduling people to come over or just doing things. I'd just be at home. I don't even know what I'd do. I'm just glad I have her. So that's awesome that you have Tabby.
She's a beautiful person.
Can you remember back, like, was there any kind of filter you were looking for when you were choosing a wife? Just real quick.
Yeah. Well, my filter was that she had to be as committed to, following God's example as I am. I mean, that was a non-negotiable. And the other is whoever it was had to have a heart for serving people. And just not an easy person to get along with. I mean, I think one of the most important things that couples can do is to simply um, be gracious and courteous to one another. And I don't remember where I heard this, but it stuck with me. Where credit was due, but I didn't make this up myself. Um, but I think it's very true. Um, and that is that, of course, men and women are different, and women need generally what they need most is they need protection, communication, and affection. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, Men, on the other hand, we're much more crude. We tend to need. I mean, this is maybe a kind of a raw truth here, but men, by and large, more we need respect, food, and sex. And if you get those three things, I know it sounds a little harsh, maybe, but it's true. And and you know, that's a really important thing, and that's what I told my sons before they got married. Is just remember, that's it. And as long as we I think as long as we do it that way, marriages go a lot better. I know it's very traditional and things like that, and for a lot of people that's just not something they like to hear, but we don't always like to hear the truth.
Well, there's things about the truth that are so good is that if it is true, like our faith, God does put design into like the world. And so for us to like find that design and be like, you know what, I wanted to do this, but really what works the best is this is how a guy thinks, this is what he needs, this is what he wants.
Hmm.
Finding that and living in that just it to me makes life easier. I mean, it's difficult being married just in general, right? Because women just are wired differently. I'd say designed differently.
Hmm.
We are designed differently, and so no, I appreciate you adding in that
Well,
little.
that's exactly right. And Jeff, the thing too that I believe is super important here is that I've learned that the number one cause for problems between two human beings, and certainly husband and wife, but it could be in a business relationship with a client or anything like that. The number one cause for broken relationships, I believe, is unrealized expectations. And when you enter into a friendship or a relationship that might be a marriage or anything, if you think about it, there's certain expectations that are set. And certainly that happens in business because we have a contract and we go through this contractual negotiation process. And then those expectations are all written out and spelled out very clearly. Um, but then outside of that, we have expectations that we've placed on other people that they oftentimes don't even know about. And that can cause problems because now we have this expectation, but it's probably going to be not realized because the other person, not only did they not know about it, they certainly aren't going to agree to it, or they didn't agree to it. For example, um, I might be sort of conjuring up and picturing this dinner out with Tabby, and and I've thought through this all myself, but then I don't realize that she's having a horrible day and she already has something else planned, and whatever the case might be, and I get home and announce, hey, let's go out for dinner, and she says no, and I'm upset and disappointed. Well, I've allowed myself to set this expectation in my head because of my thinking that she knew nothing about. And so it's unfair to be anything except accepting of that and respectful of where she is and what she wants to do at that time. And that often doesn't play out like that. Um, but then sometimes we have expectations between people that we felt like we talked about it, we agreed about on it, and everything was fine. But maybe we didn't ask the right questions and look at it from different angles to make very, very clear that we do understand the expectation. Um, and then the other challenge is that over time expectations drift apart. It's just um, the law of thermodynamics, right? The law of entropy. Things sort of just crumble unless they're managed very carefully, and expectations are one of those.
Man, that's really good. So when I hear what you say, I go back to kind of my firefighter training, which is like that's kind of a breakdown in communication too, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
if she's feeling one way, you're expecting this other thing. Um, it's like you have to have some mediums and of communication so that we can let each other know. And that, just to be clear here, I think that's one of my wife and I's like biggest things we struggled with was trying to communicate. So you're right on, is what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
Uh, but it was, we just quit communicating. It was like all in my head what I wanted and expected. And she,
Hmm.
I thought she knew for some reason. And I don't know why I even would think that way.
Yeah, we too often expect our, our wives and, you know, significant others to read our minds, and
That is not happening.
it's not going
But
to happen.
and how that relates to the fire service is like every like mistake that we make, like we, if we have a big incident, like we would go back and there's this after action review and you just talk about, well, kind of what wrong, what was good, what went wrong, so we can learn. And I'm telling you, I think it's 100% of the time there's a communication breakdown. Like you just,
Hmm.
nobody told that person this. And it's the more I talk to people and couples, that's the same thing. It's like there's just a communication breakdown in a
Hmm.
marriage. So
Yeah, that's almost always the case. And so what causes the unrealized expectation is poor communication. It was either never set properly or set at all, or the expectations went different directions because life intervenes, we forget things, different things happen to us, and we adjust the expectation a little bit, but we don't let the other person know. They adjust it a little bit and don't let us know. You add those two things together, now we're over here.
yeah,
And when a certain event triggers it, boom, it all blows up. And then the communication even gets worse because then our reptile brains take over, and that ain't cool. That's
yeah. And we just,
not a good
nothing good has
situation.
happened at that point.
Right.
I've been there, just to be clear and honest. So what was it like raising boys?
For me, it was a lot of fun. I have not had the privilege of raising a daughter. I wish that I did, um, but um, but we have two daughters-in-law now, so that's very nice. We are loving that. But it was fun. Boys are boys. They're rowdy and everything, and um, we we wrestled and played a lot and done all those kind of things and made Tabby very nervous. We lived in the Cape Cod when I raised with the boys, and we would at that time they were very into wrestling, and I'm not exactly sure what inspired all that, um, we often played that game where I would get on my knees in the middle of the room and they'd get on each corner, and they had stage names and everything. I think Nathan was The Rock, and I don't remember the other one. They could tell you what it was
That's
because they have
awesome.
fond memories of this. And I would use the let's get ready to rumble thing. I would make it very theatrical for them, and they would come at dad and try to, try
That's
to take try
awesome.
to take me down and stuff like that.
Dads take note of that one. That's a little nugget right there, just for a good time. Was playing with your kids and doing that stuff kind of natural for you? Because speaking to, there's a broad spectrum of how men, raise their children, but was that kind of
Hmm.
a natural thing playing, or I
Yeah.
feel like I grew up in a home where I don't think my dad played much, but
Yeah, we played all the time. And
yeah,
I don't know, you know, I don't know what I don't know as far as other experiences. My dad he was not super playful, but he was not distant either. I mean, I can remember sitting in his lap and things like that and watching TV with him and all of that. My dad was an outdoorsman and a hunter, and so I'd go out and do those things with him. Not that I was that into it really. I
sure,
love the outdoors. I wasn't much of a hunter like he was, but I would do it more than anything just to be able to have time with him. And I can remember being on his back with my arms around his neck, and he was carrying me through these big, tall weeds that for me were over my head, but now they'd be about, maybe waist high. And I have very vivid memories of that. And I was probably, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 years old, probably 4 or 5 years old, maybe. And so, yeah, we played constantly. We were always wrestling and jabbing and jousting with one another and things like that, respectfully. They knew where the lines were and things like that. Drove Tabby crazy because she wasn't used to all the rowdiness. You know, she had one brother. There was 8 of them,
Oh,
and she
wow.
had one brother, and you know, so it was a female energy in her house and male energy in ours, and it was pretty rough and tumble. And she would run us upstairs, and we'd go up like 3 kids and wrestle and play together. And she said it sounded like elephants fighting up there, and she'd get all nervous and concerned that somebody would get hurt, which did happen occasionally.
Sure.
But, you know, as guys, you what do? You kinda gather around and you make sure they're not bleeding from an artery and tell them to suck it up. It's only a flesh wound. Get back in the ring again, you
Yeah,
know?
round two's coming. You better get back.
Right. That's right.
Oh,
I
that's
don't know.
awesome.
Maybe that's why the oldest is an EMT now. I don't know. He's a
Yeah,
medic
he
in
had
the
the years of fixing wounds, bandaging things back when he was a kid. So,
Right. Maybe
oh,
that's
that's
it.
awesome.
No,
So
I
they're
think it's
both in
important.
the workforce. Sorry, do you have go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think it's important to, you know, to interact with the kids that way, you know?
Hmm.
Um, I think it's important. I know a lot of, or I know, men in my life who either didn't have a dad growing up, which was a big hole for them, or had a dad who was very distant and very disciplined and not maybe not that emotionally. I don't know, maybe not that emotionally intelligent or something, or just insecure. I'm not sure where that comes from, but I know it has a negative impact on sons, on boys.
Yeah. So yeah, you would encourage people to, yeah, make sure you play with your kids.
Oh yeah.
I feel like I just, you know, there's just slumps that you get in when you're hustling and you're the
Hmm.
head of house. You're trying to earn money. You're trying to like, and if you're an entrepreneur, like who knows how many like endeavors they're really trying. Sometimes and entrepreneurs don't just pick one and go. They're like doing
Hmm.
4 or 5 things at once, and family can really get jeopardized in that. So
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, there were plenty of times that I can remember when, especially the youngest, Nathan, both really, but they would come in with the ball glove and the ball, throwing the ball in the glove, and I'm on the phone. You know, there's one job I had way back in 2000, so over 20 years ago. That was just a miserable job that I had, with the exception of a great boss, but everything else was really not fun for me. Um, and I couldn't, I mean, I could, but I elected to stay focused on that because it was an important breadwinning activity and it wasn't that secure. And I had a lot of, you know, a lot to demonstrate and to show to the people who were signing my paycheck. And it really got old. So I ended up leaving that for that reason. But I said no a lot of times that I know hurt their feelings.
yeah, I think it's a fine line really because
Hmm.
there is some hustle that needs to get put into earning money, like in
Hmm.
whether it's seasonal or whatever projects are coming due or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and holding on to consistent and good relationship with your kids, and
Yeah, you know, one of the best things that I've read in a while, Jeff, is the book by Gary Keller called The One Thing. I think I've probably told you about it,
yeah.
but I'll never forget. I'm probably not going to quote this exactly, but I'll never forget the thing he wrote in the book was, um, when you're focused on the a particular thing like your work or a project or building a business or whatever it is. I'll try to get this right. What he said was, it's important that when you go out on the skinny branches on something like that, to make sure that you don't go so far out that you can't find your way back, and that you don't stay so long that there's nothing left for you when you do return. And that really was impactful for me to read that in that book. So I would encourage, I don't know Gary Keller. I've got no, you know, no skin in the game here to promote his book, but it is a great book. The One Thing. It's very good.
Yeah, that just reminds me like something I just like to say is that like what if you were able to get so successful in business, like, but at the end you look back in 20 years and you don't have a family, like you're divorced, you're kind of estranged to your kids, or you're not close with them. Like, did you really win? Was that really worth it? Or you don't
Hmm.
have faith. There's just a lot of ways that we as men, I think we can lose in life. Like you lost, like you don't have the best life. Like you do want to maintain faith. You want to maintain the family that you have. And I mean, if you have to go through that circumstance, like, yeah, there's redemption and you can do the best with the, rest of your life. And, or if you have to get remarried, but still, I think that's what is that quote is kind of leaning towards, like, you don't want to
Yeah.
get to the end and you don't have them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I I like nice things like anybody.
Yeah.
Um, I value that. I think it's great, but I don't value it as much as I do what I think is the most important thing outside of a relationship with God in this life, which is um, they're the trust relationships we have with other people. That's the most valuable thing for me because in the end, that's all you've got, all you have. I mean, if you've got, well, put it this way: if you got a call from the doctor and the doctor said, "Jeff, Dale, you've got 24 hours to live," man, none of that stuff matters. I mean, all those projects and all those clients you're chasing and the job you're trying to get and all that kind of stuff, and suddenly it doesn't matter. What does matter are the people that you love and who love you. That's it. That's all that matters. You just want to be around them every minute that you can until your last minute. And so it's a pretty good litmus test, really.
That's powerful. Really. That's really powerful.
And in that 24 hours, what are you going to do? You're going to spend as much time with them and you're going to talk about all the wonderful time you've had together.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I'm going to make my relationships right and just stay
Right.
with my family.
Yeah, that's it. And that's what you're going to focus on.
Wow. I want to change gears again. That was really powerful.
Sure.
There's a few things I'm going to just keep chewing on here, but let's go into finances.
Okay.
Where did you start? We might have to breeze through some of this, but where did you start earning a living? Like, I know you got married. Was it W-2 or did you go right into small business? I think you obviously mentioned you had jobs, but what's been your journey to get to where you are?
Well, I like to think that I started earning a living when I was 11 years old.
Okay.
Because remember, I told you I used to listen to my parents have these rough conversations about money, and I chose to believe that I was not a burden, but that they could use my help. And I just want to, I just want to, really, I want to enforce the idea that choosing what you believe it is the critical thing. And and it's a choice. You get to choose what it is you're going to believe. And so I chose to believe that my parents would benefit from my help. I wasn't a burden, and the way I could help them was to demonstrate different ways of earning money that they didn't know about. And so I didn't know about them either, but I started writing off for anything I could find. And so my mom, I was always the one of the three kids that went to the grocery store with my mother on Friday to spend the paycheck on groceries. And so I started looking for those business opportunity magazines in the magazine rack. I didn't have the money to buy one, but I would sneak it in the cart hoping my mom would pay for it. And she never did. But one day, the lady who was at the checkout, because they had to key everything in at that time, she saw that and she just, covered it herself. She paid for it herself. And I got it home and I read everything and I mailed off for everything I could. And so I started selling shoes where I could make a commission. And I also discovered that my mom, she worked in a ball cap factory and she sewed the hats on the ball caps. Well, sometimes there were some imperfections. And so they'd get tossed in this big cardboard box. And my mom would bring them home, and we'd wear them. We lived in farm country, so everybody wore a hat like that when I was a kid. But the kids at school started asking me, "Hey, where'd you get that hat? Can you get me one?" So my mother could get those for 25 cents, and so I started buying those from my mom, and I was taking them to school and selling them for $1. So I was making a pretty good margin there. And I'll never forget the day I told my mom, "Hey, I don't need an allowance anymore." Because it's in my mind, I'm helping them because they don't have to give me any money. And my mom asked me, "Where's all that money coming from?" Because I didn't tell her I was selling the hats at school. And So I told her what I was doing and that I didn't need an allowance anymore. And she put the money back in her purse and she said, "That's fine, but you're still going to wash the dishes.
Still got to earn your keep here.
You still have to do your part." So that was my first profit center. And
That's
yeah,
great.
that's
An
where that all started.
entrepreneur right there. So I know you have experience out in business. So why don't we skip ahead to where you went from the W-2
Hmm.
to owning a business?
Yeah, my business stuff started with real estate. So it was in the late 80s that I took a real interest in real estate and rental property and things like that and renovating houses, et cetera. So in the late 80s, I bought my first house in 1988, right after I started my job out of college. So I had some credit and I could actually borrow money. Um, it wasn't the best deal in the world, but I made a little profit. And I remember my interest rate was 12%. So we're all complaining about 5 or 6, today as the time of this recording here. But it was 12% interest back then. And I can remember 16, 17% interest on mortgages even. So I bought a house then and I accumulated rental property and things like that. I did that all in parallel to my W-2 jobs, building my career. And then in 2005, I had an opportunity to buy a business after having gone through several corporate jobs. I bought a business in 2005. Um, and I learned a lot from the real estate business and how to put transactions together. And I did it basically for the business, much like I did for, the way I would buy houses, because I learned to buy houses with much less of my own money. Um, and I bought this business. Was doing 700,000 in sales at the time, and when I say we, I was able to hire some good people. So I put a good team together. We built that to about 8 million in sales, and then I exited from that in 2015 when my parents both just age and working in factories and things like that, their health started to decline pretty rapidly, and so I took a couple years off, and I really spent those 2 years with my parents, my mom and dad, through their final season of life.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's that's important.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and today, I enjoy helping other business owners to be successful and to improve their profitability and cash flow and things like that. All the things.
Oh, we lost you. Hold on, Dale. You're muted. You want me to unmute you? There
Yeah.
we are.
All the I don't know how that happened. I didn't click anything, but
Uh-oh.
um, but yeah, I really navigate through the obstacles, and it's just a lot of fun for me. A lot of business owners have challenges that are um, to them they seem overwhelming, but they're really some of them can be pretty gnarly to solve, but most of them they're just not. You know.
Yeah. So what do you do today?
Well, I work as a business advisor, helping business owners to improve their profitability and by significantly improve profitability. By the way, so and my clients are any they're anywhere from 1 million to 20 million in revenue, generally in that range. The biggest client I've had was about 3 billion. That was a while ago. It was about 10 years ago. But I like the smaller businesses. Um, they tend to be able to make quicker decisions, et cetera, and so on. They don't have boards and committees to make decisions. They can make decisions a little quicker.
Yeah.
So
What
yeah,
are some of the things that you do to turn businesses around and increase profitability?
help them implement strategies that are very executable in chunks of time. Um, you know,
Like
probably
what's
no
one
surprise we work.
strategy?
What's that?
Oh, like what's one strategy, for instance?
One might be messaging. So, if you ask most business owners what they do, they'll tell you, well, I own Acme Manufacturing. We've been family owned for 20 years, that sort of thing. Nobody really cares about that.
Sure.
they just don't care. What the brain wants to know is, what can you do for me? That's number one. Number two, how long will it take me to experience the result? Number three, what do I have to give you of my time and money? And then number four, now that I have that information, what do you want me to do? What action do you want me to take? And so getting the messaging right is one of, over 50 strategies that we help to implement. Because most of what you see in advertising and on websites and things like that is very focused on the owner and the company, and it's usually driven by ego, and nobody cares that you've been family owned since 2000, or that you've been a finalist for the Malcolm Baldrige Award. That's all nice, but it
Yeah.
doesn't tell your potential customers what you can do for them.
Yeah. People really just want to know, like, what can you do for me? Like,
Yeah,
why should I even take my time here? So,
yeah, that's right. That's right. So
no,
that's a fundamental strategy we help them with.
okay. Yeah, that's great. I really enjoy your industry because I think, entrepreneurs or small business owners can get really lost, right? Trying to spin all the plates that it takes, like, to really get a business profitable and going. And if are trying to grow at this point, um, or if they're trying to exit, like, there's so many hats that a lot of small business owners wear, where once you get in those bigger ones, they hired someone for all those pieces, right? And so there's
Mhm.
just a lot of stress and weight that goes on small business owners. So I really
Yeah,
like your industry.
yeah. There's a couple, maybe three mistake. These are the common mistakes that are absolutely avoidable that most business owners make or are making on a regular basis. So I'll give you these. Number one is they're very focused on profit. Now that's important. We got to be profitable, but cash flow is even more important. Profit is a theory, cash flow is a fact. Okay. And so those are two very different things. Um, you know, um, the other is the business owners way too often do minimum wage work. It's really tragic. Um, Go to the One Thing with Gary Keller. That's a great place to start to stop doing things you shouldn't be doing. And then and the third thing is serving the right people for the right purpose. Um, because I just have this real loathing and disdain for hyperbole, and so I think it's in Ephesians. I think it's chapter 3 where Paul writes to the church of Ephesus about how important it is to not lie, number one, and be clear. And it basically says, don't puff things up. Just say things like they are and be honest and don't lie. And you know, those three things are pretty important.
I like that. I was kind of hoping we were going to get into the whole back half of this podcast on these topics here. But in the interest of time, I know I've taken your hour. I really think this is valuable. Even what we got into, like just the faith, family, and finance portions, I think it's going to be very valuable for the listener. So, Dale, I appreciate having you on. How can people find you or reach out to you if they want to know more or work with you?
Well, they can go to businessbreakthroughadvisors.com. That's the website. All three words, businessbreakthroughadvisors.com. They can send me an email to Dale at businessbreakthroughadvisors.com. Also connect with me on LinkedIn, and it's linkedin.com/in/Dale Gibbons. Pretty easy to find.
Awesome, Dale. Well, I appreciate you being here today. And so this concludes episode number 1 of a Father's Flame podcast. So subscribe to hear more. There'll be plenty of interviews with more other successful entrepreneurs, um, their fathers, and, they have wisdom to share. So share this out also with people who may need to be encouraged and hear the message that you heard today. Blessings. And now take what you learned today and be the man of God that He is calling you to be.